Ladies and gentlemen, I know that I'm a little late to the party here, and it was quite a while ago at this point that the clock struck 12 and we entered into the year of 2021, but better late than never. So in today's video, we're gonna go over the 7 life lessons I learned in 2020. Now I'm gonna share some extremely intimate stuff with you guys here, so go ahead and drop a like down below if you appreciate the honesty. And quite frankly, I'm not sure how this video is gonna do. You know, it's a little different from the normal sort of agency business content that I post. Go ahead and drop a like if you enjoyed it, just to let me know that yeah, you don't mind seeing content like this. So with no further ado, let's get straight into it. Now, the first lesson I learned in 2020 is sometimes it is better to keep your opinion and your worldview to yourself. Now, don't take this the wrong way. I believe the real pandemic in 2020 was people not standing up for what they know in their heart of hearts is wrong. And I will continue to voice my opinion and stand up for things that I know are right. I'll continue to admit when I'm wrong. And, you know, when I had a opinion that was changed because of new information or new evidence that I found. And I'll continue to do all those things because the search for truth is one of the most important journeys you'll ever go on in your entire life. And you know, those truths can change day by day, month by month, year by year. And as I said, you always get opposing information and opposing viewpoints. And that can lead to you changing your mind. But really what I'm trying to say here is really just to conserve your energy and pick your battles. I realize that there is no point trying to sway someone's opinion when they have a vested interest in the topic at hand, or when they have a loved one, for example, who has a vested interest. There's a lot of different biases. And obviously 2020 was a very divisive year. A lot of, quite frankly, just a lot of arguing, a lot of disagreements, a lot of two sides going at it. And here's the thing, the amount of energy it takes to have a productive conversation with someone, especially when you lay out so much evidence and so many facts that you spend dozens of hours, if not hundreds of hours collating, and they still can't see it. It's probably one of the most exhausting and demoralizing things on earth. So 2020 really taught me that I need to pick my battles. And I think for me personally, I also need to be a lot less intense when I speak. You know, when I speak my truth to people, for me, it's like, I almost just want to shake them and go, look, how can you not see this? But at the end of the day, that can end up, you know, putting someone's wall up. And then no matter how good your information or your facts or whatever you're presenting, they're always going to have that wall up and it's not going to be able to land. Furthermore, 2020 was a year where I really had to question everything. A lot of my viewpoints and a lot of my worldview, you know, really was challenged and molded to something totally different. And one thing that I had to learn to do, and I'm still continuing to do, is once I've gone out there, once I've done my dozens of hours of research, if not hundreds of hours of research, to make sure that once I've formed that viewpoint, I constantly find opposing viewpoints to test that hypothesis. And you know, this can be an extremely dizzying experience. You know, part of me almost wishes that I stayed in my little lane and you know, just focused on, because here's the thing, I still don't watch the news. I don't think you're educated if you watch the news. I think you're quite the opposite, in fact. I don't think the news is a good place to get your information when some of their biggest sponsors are people who are under the firing line and have the billions and billions to spend to mold public perception. You know, throw 50 million that way, throw 200 million that way, and let the media mold a better narrative of them. So here's the thing, you know, I've actually just never watched news in my entire life. Obviously I have. I remember my friend's parents would always tell me,
if you want to be educated, you have to watch the news.
Now I realize how foolish they are. Quite frankly, if you want to get educated, the last place on earth you should look is the news. But as I said, you know, part of me wishes that I still didn't understand the difference between left, right, between Republican and Democrat, and to be honest, I still don't care. Quite frankly, I consider myself more of a libertarian. I hate the left, I hate the right. Quite frankly, I think they're both pretty scummy. Actually, government is pretty scummy.
Yes, I mean, no, possibly.
But anyways, that's a conversation for another day, I guess. Anyways, my point is I definitely left 2020, you know, very similar to the movie The Matrix, where I was just like, I kind of wish... It's kind of like when you first find out about entrepreneurship or business and you're like, oh, wow, so you're telling me I don't actually have to go to university and end up with, you know, between $20,000 and $300,000 in student debt? Wow, there's actually a better way? I don't need a college degree? No! Once you realize stuff like that, you can't unsee it. And it was a very similar thing when I, you know, took a lot of time in 2020, as I said, hundreds of hours to understand geopolitics and from a macro perspective, what's going on in the world, the different incentives. And yeah, long story short, like part of me wishes I didn't know this stuff. But the main lesson that I took from 2020 is just don't try to argue with people who are just dead set on their position and their opinion. Also, never try to argue with someone who gets their information from general media or news, because as I said, they're just uneducated. So really what that means is now when I'm at a dinner table, I kind of pick and choose my battles. Depending on who I'm with, I decide, is there any point in throwing in a curveball, throwing in an opposing viewpoint? Because I said, some people are just so dead set in their ways that you really need to pick and choose your battles. So that was the first lesson that I learned in 2020. The second lesson that I learned in 2020 is that good times create weak men. By the way, this applies to females too. I can only just speak from my gender and my experience. Because the most dangerous time in a person's life is when everything's going well. And same thing with a country or an empire or a civilization. The most dangerous time is when everything's been going well. And as I said, I'm referring to men here because I can kind of only speak about that side of the fence, but men are weaker than they've ever been. And by the way, I'm not talking here about toxic masculinity because I already know that someone's going to try to point the finger and go,
you're perpetuating toxic masculinity.
Far from it. As you guys know, any of you that have watched this channel in detail, I believe in deep healing. I believe in healing trauma. I believe that men have emotions, men cry, men go through very, very tough times. And unfortunately, men, I think, account for something like 78% of suicides. Being a woman in this world is extremely tough. Being a man in this world is extremely tough. The only difference, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, is that as a woman, it's okay to express those emotions and show weakness. As a man, in a lot of ways, it's looked down upon. So I'm not talking about toxic masculinity here. I'm talking about things like gluttony, laziness, sloth. These are really just all sins. Men are really having their energy zapped from things like porn, video games, the water that we're drinking, the GMO foods that we're eating, the EMFs. A lot of people will call you a crazy conspiracy theorist if you talk about this sort of stuff. But just do your research. It won't take you long to come to the same conclusion, which is these things are leading to the slow and gradual death of strong men. And once again, when I'm talking about strength, I'm not talking about physical strength here. And it's such a shame because in society, I feel as though it's become a bad thing, or it's looked down upon to be a strong man, to be a man who leads, who puts his foot down, who knows what he wants. I almost feel as though that's looked down upon. And even growing up, there's so many things where society and the culture is trying to weaken you. I find it, disgusting, quite frankly, that teachers, and by the way, I know this because in school, I'm sure you remember in school you have sex ed. I vividly remember, teachers saying, yeah, it's totally fine to masturbate to porn once a day, twice a day. I cannot believe that teachers are allowed to put that into young teenagers' brains. Look, if you want to masturbate to porn once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day, there's people who do it 10 times a day.
Stop it. Get some help.
Be my guest, but know what that is doing for your brain. If you want to fry your brain, if you want to lower your testosterone, if you want to objectify women, if you want to not be able to interact with the opposite sex, which is already a huge, huge issue in our culture. These days men can only interact by texting or just a whole host of weird, convoluted other methods to meet the opposite sex and interact with the opposite sex. These days, you can't just go up and say hi. So as I said, to me, it's absolutely crazy, the way that we grow up as men these days. Most of the time without role models. I know I come from a fatherless home. My biological father, he was an alcoholic, abusive. So, he was out the picture before I was born. My stepfather, I saw maybe 2 months out of the year. And I kind of wish he wasn't around. He was more of a, he was a real tyrant. Like there was deep, deep psychological scars. So yeah, he basically taught me everything that a man of honor should not be. So, I know what it's like to grow up in basically a fatherless home. It's a real issue these days. Men are growing up without fathers, and that's an issue. It is. In the same way boys growing up in homes without mothers is a big issue. You need both of them there. But anyways, I digress. My point is, I think it's never been harder to grow up as a boy. There are so many challenges. There's so many pitfalls. Even once again, going back to school, I remember in my school, teachers would tell the children that it was okay to be overweight. And I have a real problem with that. To me, that's like telling kids that it's okay to smoke. I have no issue with whatever you want to do in your life, but I find it absurd, this culture we live in where we try to not hurt anyone's feelings, try to make everyone feel inclusive, and a whole host of other stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, you would not go to a smoker and go, it's good that you smoke. If they want to smoke, if they want to do that with their life, that's totally fine. Guys, usually 9 months of the year, I won't drink. And then 3 months of the year, where I'm in a more party phase of that year, is, in the same way you go through seasons, I go through seasons with my work ethic and the amount of time and effort that I'm putting into my business. When I go out and I party and I drink, and I can drink a lot, I'm Russian. I know exactly what I'm doing. I know that it's not good for me. It's not good for my health, but I have that understanding and I still do it. So as I said, ladies and gents, if you smoke, if you eat, fast food every day, if you do drugs, I don't label anything as good or bad, but I don't think you should be putting being overweight on a pedestal. And it almost feels like we live in a society. As I said, I know in my school, it was like, there's nothing wrong with that at all. And it's like, love yourself, love your body, love your imperfections, love your flaws. But at the end of the day, that is, being overweight is a byproduct of being unhealthy. And I don't think we should promote unhealthiness. I think everyone should be strong and fit. And by the way, when I say strong, I'm not talking physically. You don't all have to be physically strong. I'm talking about go out there, challenge yourself physically, get strong physically, get strong mentally, emotionally, spiritually. So as I said, it's a weird world we live in. I really do worry about the future of men in society. As I said, there's just from so many angles, porn, video games, EMFs, your phone right next to your genitals, the way that that's just blasting your sperm count, erectile dysfunction, the obesity epidemic, and just the fact that more and more men, suicides are going up. And as I said, those are primarily men. So when I say strong men, I'm not talking, as I mentioned, about toxic masculinity. I'm talking about men that can tap into their emotions and their feelings. And to me, that is strength. And we're not teaching that. You go to school, you learn algebra, but you don't learn meditation and how to deal with anxiety and stress. It's ridiculous. So I think 2020 for me was definitely a year where I kind of looked around, and I guess that's one of the lessons that I learned. Is I looked around and I was like, wow, we are in a society of very, very weak men, just to put it bluntly. Now, from a more, it's very easy for me to look at everyone else and judge. From a more internal perspective, or pointing the mirror back at myself, same thing. Good times when things are going the best, when there's a 3, 4, 5 month run where I'm on top of the world with my health and my fitness, and my spiritual practice and my business. Inevitably, you start to lose those disciplines, traits that got you there in the first place. So it's very easy for me to judge everyone else. I do it myself. I have good times in my life, and those good times actually inevitably make me weak. So ladies and gents, that is the second life lesson that I learned in 2020. And by the way, I apologize for every single person who came expecting me to just make some really Tumblr or Instagram inspirational 7 life lessons I learned. These are some very heavy hitting ones. I understand. I apologize for someone that wanted something a little lighter. But that's just how I looked at the world in 2020, quite frankly. So the third thing that I learned in 2020, and it's something that I believed for a long time, was that you can basically heal yourself of pretty much any ailment naturally. So for the first 6 months of 2020, my health and my nutrition and everything, I'd say was at, or what I believed at the time, around an 80%, an 8 out of 10. Now looking back at it, I guess with the lens that I view nutrition, I'd say it was probably closer to a 6 out of 10. And the first half of 2020, I also experimented with a lot of fasts. I did a lot of 48-hour fasts, 72-hour fasts. And by the way, whenever I post anything on my Instagram about fasts, I get the 1 or 2 idiots who are like, that is dangerous, or you should seek, medical professional to help you. Just random guys. We have been fasting for thousands, well, not thousands, tens of thousands of years, right? It is in every single religious textbook. And by the way, I'm not actually religious myself. I believe it's called agnostic, I believe it's called agnostic, where you believe in a God, you just haven't chosen a religion yet. I don't know. Point is, I'm not a devout Christian or Muslim or this or that. I just think there is a lot of wisdom in those religious texts. Ladies and gents, if you've ever had a dog and your dog is sick, if you remember correctly, do you know what happens? Your dog goes it kind of hides away in a corner and doesn't drink or eat for a day or two. And that is to allow its body to heal. Do you ever wonder why when you get the flu or when you're sick or anything like that, you lose your appetite? That's because your body does not want to deal with the effects of digesting food, the thermogenic effect and the thermogenic energy expended to digest food when it needs to heal itself. So fasting is such an incredible and such a powerful protocol. Once again, we just live in a weird, convoluted world where you think you need to eat 4 meals or 3 meals a day to survive. So basically that's where things were at in the first 6 months of the year. Then midway through the year, I actually developed a chronic autoimmune condition, and I got it pretty bad. It's something called psoriasis. So, you know, a lot of people have psoriasis. So basically what it is your body thinks your skin is under attack. So it produces more skin cells than is needed. But your skin actually isn't under attack. And there's kind of scales to it. I was definitely towards the worst end of it. And that came around kind of beginning of July and was around for kind of mid-June actually. And I basically had it for around 3 months, you know, from the point in which, or 3.5 months from the point in which I got it. You know, I spent basically 6 to 8 weeks becoming the foremost expert on this chronic autoimmune condition. I went to all the best doctors, the most expensive doctors, all of the Harley Street Clinic doctors and dermatologists. Every single doctor and dermatologist told me straight to my face, that's it, it'll be with you for the rest of your life. This is not something you can cure. This is just something that you can manage. Yeah, and then, you know, going online and doing more research and, you know, seeing even celebrities that have it. Kim Kardashian is a notable example of that. You know, I'm sat here thinking, sheesh, you know, this woman's got hundreds of millions of dollars, the best doctors in the world. And, you know, she's struggled with it for 20 years. You know, she can't even deal with it. You know, who am I to think that I can heal it naturally? Anyways, long story short, I ended up going on something known as a carnivore diet. You know, I don't recommend it for everyone. I'm a big fan of it. I believe that, you know, a ketogenic way of eating is the most natural way of eating, you know, especially for someone like myself. You know, my origins are from Russia. Please tell me where 9 months of the years I would find vegetables. I'm very curious because, you know, my grandma's, which I grew up for the first 3-4 years of my life, I'm very attuned to the seasons and when you can actually pick things off of trees and vines and when you can actually eat things, because I've had the experience of it, you know, in April picking something off a vine in my grandmother's back garden, eating it, you know, having that absolutely horrible sour taste and then getting sick the next day because it's just not ripe. So yeah, you know, it totally depends which lens you view the world. For people that believe that a vegan diet is the kind of the most natural way of eating, I totally respect that. I get that. You know, obviously we have opposing viewpoints, but, you know, who cares? Like, I think at the end of the day, whatever diet you do, I've said this before, as long as you're not eating processed food, you're winning. Like, you're already in the top 1%. So, you know, I don't see a point in, I see a lot of times vegans and carnivores and, you know, people who do keto or paleo and they all fight with it. Guys, who cares? Like, as long as you're not eating processed food and it works for you, you know, do your thing. Well, anyways, long story short, I did strict carnivore for around 7 weeks, and within 8 weeks, totally clear. Like, you know, you can actually go watch my videos between like mid-August to like mid-September. You'll probably notice I'm not wearing any t-shirts or anything like that. And then from like, you know, mid-October onwards, you'll see that I'm, you know, doing Q&As on the second channel or even just some of the videos on the main channel. Like, I'm wearing t-shirts and you'll see like I have absolutely nothing on my arms. So, yeah, you know, it took me 6 weeks of eating meat. I only ate meat or meat-related products. I got very, very into my detoxing. So as I said, you know, earlier in the year, I had done, you know, before I had any sort of autoimmune condition, I did a lot of fasts. In general, as you guys know, I'm very, very healthy. I stay very healthy, very active, very fit. But the second half of 2020 really forced me to crank things up. So, you know, it was just a lot of, obviously, you know, for 6 to 8 weeks, I was meat. I also cut out caffeine. And then from that, it was a lot of liver detoxing and just healing leaky gut. Most people don't know, you know, 95% of people, I'd say, have leaky gut and have parasites. You're probably sitting on the opposite end of this and going, oh, for me, I would, you know, I definitely don't have parasites or leaky gut or, you know, suffer from any of this stuff. Yeah, you do. Like, trust me. Like, there are people, I have friends who have dedicated their entire lives to holistic health and detoxing and even dealing with parasites that live inside of humans. And they still suffer from this stuff. So trust me, you do. So yeah, you know, not to get too graphic, but I spent a lot of the second half of 2020 just detoxing. Well, I say the second half of 2020, by the time that mid-October rolled around, I was like, God damn, I cleared this thing. And then I spent the next 6 weeks basically, obviously, you know, still working, but there was a lot of partying. There was just a lot of social stuff that happened in October. So yeah, I was strict for 6 weeks, and then there was another 4 weeks of healing. And then actually I went off the rails for 6 weeks, and then it came back, and then I did another strict 6 weeks. So for me, it was just super obvious and super clear that, like, yes, of course, the food you eat is going to affect, you know, things like autoimmune conditions. So, you know, no matter what you have, whatever your autoimmune condition, really they're all the same, which is your body is attacking itself, you know, for no reason. Your immune system is confused, you know. Unless you have some sort of genetical predisposition for an autoimmune condition, which I don't. No one in my family has psoriasis or anything like that. Like, it's people, you know, doctors don't even know why it comes about. Like, it's something just happens in your body. I actually think it was the last tattoo that I got, because it was, you know, all my tattoos are pretty light. So the last tattoo I got was a lot heavier, and I remember it just took like a long time to heal. So I think it was actually that, or, you know, maybe I might have been allergic to the ink specifically for that tattoo. I'm not sure. That's kind of the only hypothesis that I have. That, or it was just a freak coincidence, and, you know, when it happened, it just turned something on in your body, you know, flip switches, and kind of the cat is out the bag. But as I said, no matter what you have, I am under the full belief that you can heal it naturally. And, you know, people have used things like a vegan diet or a carnivore diet to heal things like not only autoimmune conditions, but things like depression, things like ADHD. You know, I obviously, you know, even before this stuff happened, I had such a disdain for the pharmaceutical industry. I don't take anything. You know, the only time I can ever remember taking a painkiller ever in my life was when I tore and by the way, this is also the only time I've ever been to a hospital. And yeah, that one time when I went to the hospital, that was because I dislocated my shoulder and tore my hip flexor at the same time. Literally in the space of the same 2 seconds while playing football. So anyways, long story short, for me, it reaffirmed it. It's like, okay, cool. If I'm literally spending $1,000 an hour, and it's not even an hour because most of the time they sit with you for 15 to 30 minutes on these private doctors, these private dermatologists, because, you know, luckily I'm in a very fortunate position where I've worked extremely hard over the last 4.5 years, all my businesses, where I literally can get the best help in the world. In terms of doctors and, you know, in this case, dermatologists, which is funny because psoriasis literally has nothing to do with your skin. It's an autoimmune condition. It's just where it shows up. As I said, all, you know, I think there's something like 90 autoimmune conditions. They're pretty much all the same thing. It's just where on the body does it show up. So yeah, you know, a little side note. So as I said, you know, from beginning of September or end of August, that's when I started my carnivore diet. You know, stayed strict with that for 6 weeks, then kind of fell off the bandwagon. Once I cleared it, I was like, oh my God, I cleared it. And then you know, I just basically went on a 6 to 8 week, just, you know, doing whatever I want, really starting to drink caffeine again, you know, having, you know, going out with friends, enjoying a pasta, this, that. And then it came back, and then it took another around 6 weeks to clear, but, you know, I'm cleared again now. And I mean, I got tons and tons of messages from people with different autoimmune conditions saying like, hey, how the hell do you clear? If you want me to make like a full in-depth, you know, 45-minute, 1 hour video, then, you know, I'd be more than happy to do that as well, and show you not only how I cleared it one time, now a second time. And now at this point, basically I just do a keto diet, quick caffeine. Once again, you know, been off caffeine for a while. And I know now for sure I will never go back to it. So yeah, as I said, now my diet for me is at a 10 out of 10. My energy is at a 10 out of 10. My health is at a 10 out of 10. You know, in 2020, I had to do a lot of biohacking protocols that I never thought I would have done. A lot of steam room sauna cold plunge. You know, I recommend that to everyone, hot and cold exposure. A lot of Epsom salt baths, but when you do an Epsom salt bath, most people just sprinkle a little in there. You're gonna wanna do a kilo. I actually even do 2 kilos sometime. Be careful with that though. Just because the amount of magnesium that goes into your system. Like I would refrain from 2 kilos. That's, yeah, like I'm just a bit of a madman when it comes to this sort of stuff. So I just do 1 kilo. And things like coffee enemas. Yep, that's right. I don't drink coffee anymore, but I still do in whatever. Now, for any of you guys who've been following my stuff for a while, you know that, I've worked with detox coaches. One of my good friends is a guy called Detox Dudes. And, we worked together on doing a lot of liver purges, dealing with any parasites, healing leaky gut. And we did this stuff, well before I had this chronic autoimmune condition come up. And that was, late 2019. And I was totally down for everything that Josh recommended. The one thing that I told him was, dude, there is absolutely zero way, zero chance I'm putting coffee up my you-know-what. And yeah, it took a year and me getting a chronic autoimmune condition. But eventually I listened. And I can tell you, as funny as it sounds, and I really wish it wasn't as incredible at basically cleansing your liver. So, the reason that you want to use coffee is because it stimulates your vagus nerve, and then that basically forces your liver to purge. Yeah, I really, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, wish it wasn't as effective of a detox and biohacking protocol, but it's probably one of, if not the best protocol out there. Yeah, as I said, I really, really wish it wasn't. But yeah, long story short, my point here is, 2020 really affirmed what I already knew, which is you can heal anything naturally. And all I can say is to all the doctors out there, I know you guys have an incredible intention. I know you're doing it with the best thought in mind, but pills aren't always the solution. Antibiotics, which by the way are, in 10% of cases are God's miracle, in 90% of cases are literally the most detrimental thing that you can do to yourself and will cause years and years of anguish.
Oh, okay, goddamn.
Yeah, as I said, sometimes pills and antibiotics are not the answer. And a holistic approach is the answer 90% of the time. And 10% of the time, if you cannot, from the bottom of your heart, you've actually tried and you cannot heal it naturally, then yeah, maybe consider some pharmaceutical products. But as I said, not one doctor, not two doctors, probably 4 doctors and 3 dermatologists, the best of the best in the UK. As I said, all of them at least 700 pounds an hour, so $1,000 an hour. It's not even an hour. Every single one of them told me I couldn't clear it. And not only did I do it once, I did it twice. And when I relapsed or when I came back, it was very obvious why. 6 to 8 weeks of drinking 2-3 times a week. Because I said, there was a lot of parties going, I had a very quiet summer because I was boxing, for 2 months. I was focused for so long in the year that eventually when some social stuff started happening, I was in the mood again and, drinking a couple times a week, coffee, pastas. I mean, stuff that, most people do as a day-to-day normally. That stuff made it come back and then I cleared it once again. So yeah, don't take what your doctor says as gospel. Ladies and gentlemen, your body is designed to heal itself. So just take 3 months, try to heal it naturally. If it still doesn't work and you've genuinely given it a crack, then go ahead and, you can try some of the pharmaceutical products. Now, the next thing that I learned in 2020, or at least I had a lot more appreciation for, is depression and anxiety and suicidal thoughts. Because it really can happen to anyone. And I kind of had one of those dark night of the soul moments in 2020. So for some context, before July or before July-ish, August-ish of 2020, I had never experienced anxiety in my life. Had never experienced depression in my life, suicidal thoughts, this, that. Maybe a little bit when I was younger. Actually, in all fairness, here and there when I was younger, I went through a pretty traumatic upbringing. Just saw some not very nice things. So I guess that was that. But in my teenage years and more recent years, never really experienced those things. And July just came out of nowhere. I remember this is maybe mid-July, and I was in Manchester for a couple months boxing, and I came back to London for a weekend, and just hung out with some friends, went for dinner, had some bottles of wine. There was probably 10 of us. A couple of my guy friends and I had some cigars, went to a party, this, that. I ended up getting home pretty late, probably 5:30. I remember I woke up at 9:30, got in my shower, turned on the shower, laid crisscross applesauce on the floor, and just started weeping. And it was a very, at that time I was very confused because I didn't know why, but I was just really, really sad. And what that started was a 6-week bout of just really, really intense anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts. Like, I remember I would wake up and my heart would just be pounding. And obviously the first thing that I would do when that would happen is I would go and, I was in Manchester and, drove up and brought my Juve, which is like a red light therapy thing. I would sit in front of my Juve and just meditate for 15 minutes because I thought that if my heart rate is up and I'm feeling anxious, I can meditate this away. It's no issues. I've been meditating for 7 years. I can meditate this away. Wouldn't go away. And it got to a point where after that crisscross applesauce event, kind of just things deteriorated for 2 to 3 weeks to the point where, I was in the midst of a full-blown mental breakdown. And I remember from the moment in which I woke up, it was crazy, the craziest experience I've ever had. From the moment I woke up to probably 4 or 5 p.m., the only way I can describe it is almost like being possessed by some demon. Or that something else was like, some other life force was inside of me, or almost like, I guess what it feels like to be bipolar, where it's like, it's two different people. From 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., the only thing was on my mind for a solid like 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks, was how I was going to kill myself. And by the time that 4 or 5 p.m. rolled around, I was totally fine. I was happy. I was smiling. But on another note, from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., I probably would cry 4 or 5 times. And, I'm smiling now because it's just like, it's so wild to think about it. But it was such a painful painful, period of my life. And, I can only thank someone, thank God, I don't know who to thank, but I can only thank someone, that it was 6 weeks, and it wasn't 6 months or 6 years, because a lot of people have to live with that for years and years and years. And I don't know if I would have made it if it was 6 months or if it was 6 years, because it literally was a living hell. Before that point, I'd always heard stories of depression and suicidal thoughts and anxiety. And I could never really relate. Now I can relate. And although it's very, very painful and it was a really tough point in my life, it's now something that, it's something that I have a lot of respect towards. I have a lot of respect towards people going through it. And, really the things that got me out of that period, from the point in which I was like, yo, this is serious. And it was, I'll give you an example. I was on a team call, and I had just gone off a team call, and Kieran was with me in Manchester. Kieran, who's the product manager at Great Agency. I got off the team call, and Kieran's right by my side, and I break down. And for me to have a breakdown, like a full mental breakdown in front of my, basically left-hand man, right-hand man of one of my companies. And, I just go, I'm like, I say to Kieran, I'm like, sometimes I just think it'd be easier if I wasn't here. That was kind of my thinking for a solid few weeks. And as I said, it's so crazy because it came so quick. And I don't want to say it left quick, but it was definitely a gradual, from the point in which I'm like, okay, I need to really take care of myself here. From there, kind of at the height of when it got the worst, I had a few more days just coincidentally in Manchester with the boxing. And then I went to Iceland and really just took a week for myself to regroup, gather my thoughts. I did a lot of meditating, a lot of breathing work, a lot of biohacking there. They've got all of the springs. So spent a lot of time in the springs, cold exposure, warm exposure, did a lot of journaling, and just did a lot of very introspective work. And I remember the sort of last little bout of anxiety or depression was probably like a few days after I moved into, my new 4-floor house in London. I was super excited about that. That was one of the things that I was missing out on because, in 2020, I'd basically been living out of a suitcase for 9 months until I'd moved into my home. So yeah, long story short, I remember this is maybe 4 or 5 days in, I'm like feeling that anxiety again. And I feel myself and I'm about to start crying and like having a breakdown. And I knew that, first of all, it's not good to kind of escape from those emotions. So first thing I did, because I just wanted to snap myself out of it, was I went to the gym and I went steam room sauna cold plunge and I did 4 or 5 rounds of those. And then I came home and I journaled and I meditated. And, that's really I didn't spend much time in that world of anxiety and depression, but from the limited time that I did spend there, the only advice that I can give you is you got to dial everything in. You got to dial everything in terms of, well, first of all, you have to do a lot of deep healing work, and you got to ask yourself, where is it coming from? And you have to tackle it head on. As I said, for me, the crazy thing was I had just gone from the best 6 months of my life, literally from January until July. Basically the 6 months I was in Cape Town last year, to 10 days in London, to like the first month of the boxing in Manchester, like I was on top of the world. I was having a great time. 2020 was a great year for me, the first 7 months especially. So it just kind of came out of nowhere, and I couldn't really pinpoint any reason to. And people were like, oh, it's because you're stressed or this. I'm like, guys, you think this is anything new to me? Like, I've had so many more periods in my life where I'm so much more stressed, or I have so much more on my mind than that point. And who knows, maybe it was delayed onset, but yeah, that's I guess my best recommendation from the limited time I spent in that world is just really take care of yourself. I remember one of the big things that got me through it was like when things were really tough, I would just close my eyes. And I remember, once again, one of my good friends, Josh, Detox Dudes, he was a very, very big help because, he spent 2-3 years in that place. And, one of the big things that he did to get through it was he would just I think it's called I forget what it's called. There's a name for it. Havening or something. I think so. Where you go like that and you literally just almost give yourself a hug. And, when things would get really bad, I would go like that and I go, I love you, man. I love you, man. And I learned that from Josh. And when things would be, when I'd be doing some of my biohacking detox protocols, and I'd be in the steam room sauna or the cold plunge, I would close my eyes as things were really tough, and I would go, in God's grace, in God's grace. And I don't know why I was called to do that, but I was called to do it. And, that's just one thing that kind of got me through that period, was those two things. So, really you have to be quite gentle with yourself. And you really, really have to protect your energy in that space. During that time, I also deleted Instagram off my phone for 3-4 weeks. I basically didn't respond to anyone for 3-4 weeks. Didn't see anyone for 3-4 weeks. Except for a couple close friends who knew what was going on, and they were kind of helping me work through that. And I was just really, really protective of my energy. And, anyone who's going through that, I guess that's one other little piece of advice that I could give you. Now, moving on to the next lesson I learned in 2020. Once again, it was one of those that I already knew, but it was reaffirmed in 2020. And that's that you have to do your own healing, and you have to love yourself before anyone else can love you, or you can truly love anyone else. I've always said I don't believe in none of this he or she completes me bullshit. You guys are two whole people. The sum of you together is greater than you guys separately. I kind of spent a lot of time just being to myself and protecting my energy, in 2020. I got out of what was basically around a 2.5-year relationship right at the beginning of March. And after that, I decided, and by the way, this is pre-lockdowns in Cape Town and stuff. I was in Cape Town at this point. So it wasn't like I made this decision because it was lockdown or this, that, At that point, I decided basically I wanted to be celibate for 3 months. And I really just wanted to protect my energy and just kind of go inside and just really spend a lot of time with myself. And, that was something that was important to me. I got to 2.5 months, which for me, I'm very, very proud of. I was very, very happy with that, to be honest. And, I came out of that relationship after doing a lot of, inner work right after, the next 4 to 6 weeks after, a lot of meditation, a lot of inner work, a lot of breath work, a lot of healing. I came out of it in the best place I'd ever been in my life, to be honest. And, that kind of kept going. And, I was in a really good place when finally, after, being almost stuck in South Africa for 6 months, I finally came back to London. And then I had 10 days of partying and fooling around and this and that before I went to Manchester for 6 weeks. And then I had the whole depressive bout, anxiety bout, and that came about. And from that point, once again, I was that time unintentionally celibate for 3 months because I was dealing with so much personally that I couldn't share my energy with anyone else, even if it was just for a night. The idea of that was just the last thing on my mind. I just wanted to protect my own energy and just do a lot of healing. So, I think that a lot of people are really scared to be just alone with themselves, and you shouldn't be. I think you need to really look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, have I done a lot of the work? Have I done a lot of the healing work? And am I ready to share my energy with someone else? And if the answer is no, then like, that's so exciting. Like, you get to go through, like, I personally think the most growth is when you're single, and not single and, and trust me, I've done a lot of this in my life. Single and distracting yourself and, being involved with tons of romantic flings and this and that. That's fine. That's another season of life. But once again, that it distracts you. It distracts you from doing that real inner healing work. So, as I said, really just ask yourself, what season of life are you in, and be honest with yourself. So as I said, I kind of had 2 periods of the year where I was just very to myself, protecting my energy, celibate, which, as I said, I think is a very, very powerful tool. One, as I said, which was intentional, which is after I ended my last relationship, and I was like, I kind of just want 3 months to myself. The second one, which was definitely not intentional, which was, sick, autoimmune condition, and this like crazy bout of depression and anxiety. That one definitely I was not planning for. But those 2 things led me to getting to the point where I was, I'd done a lot of work on myself over the space of the year. And you always find love in weird places, or when you're not expecting it, or when you kind of want it the least. And ended up the year in a relationship that I'm just so incredibly grateful for and happy about. And as I said, a relationship that I didn't see coming, or didn't see it blossoming into what it is. So yeah, as I said, my next life lesson, or a really important life lesson that was reaffirmed to me, was that I kind of really went about things the right way in 2020, romantically, in the sense that I knew when it was time to protect my energy, and I just really needed to do some inner work. When it was time where, I felt great in myself, I felt strong in myself, and I felt that I could bring that to the table with someone else. So I was very happy with the way that I went about that in 2020. And it was, as I said, one of those things where I already knew, but it really reaffirmed an important lesson for me. The 6th lesson I learned in 2020 is don't blow your load too quickly. And that's a very crass way of saying that, but I don't really know how else to put it. And basically what I'm trying to say here is don't get ahead of yourself. You have so much life to live. I know that 90% of my demographic watching are either entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs. And quite frankly, you are going to have a lot of financial options. You're going to have a lot of options with where to travel, what to do with your life. And all I can say is kind of just don't get ahead of yourself, and leave some things for the future, because then you just get really jaded and bored. And you're really going to get to a point where you ask yourself, what's left? There was an example that, and that was actually something that made me think of it, and it's probably not relatable at all. I totally apologize. This is not kind of your average. You're probably thinking, you're gonna listen to this and go, oh, boo-hoo, like poor you, Iman. But it just it's something that made me think, or it's how this kind of idea came about. And in December, I was actually gonna get my mom a Porsche 911. Obviously, as you guys know, my mom is my hero, my angel. I literally owe everything to my mom. We had a very very difficult upbringing. It was just her and I, but she managed to get us through it. So obviously, any of my success that I have, I want to spoil her with it. But anyways, I thought about that, and I was like, Iman, you are, recently turned 20. But at the time, December 2020, at that point, I'm still 20 years old. Iman, you're 20 years old. And that's what I kind of thought about this term. I was like, don't blow your load so early. Ew, dude! What the fuck? Like, you have so many more years. And, I thought about it, and I was like, man, if you invested that money, in 5 years, you could buy her a Porsche and a Bentley. Or in 5 years, or, in 10 years, you could probably buy her a house for that. So, just take your time, kiddo. And sometimes I because as much of an adult as I think I am, and yes, I am an adult, and yes, I, have a team of 9 employees, and yes, I have $100K a month in expenses for the business, and I have all this responsibility and this and that. Like, at the end of the day, I'm 21, and there's so much left of life to live, and sometimes I kind of have to remind myself, man, like, don't blow your load, like. Just take your time. There's so much left of life to live, as I said. And, really, if you're young, just take a step back, prioritize investing. That's another thing that I'd say. And that's, I guess a viewpoint that's changed for me in 2020. Really live below your means and invest. I started off 2020 with an investment portfolio of basically zero, and ended off the year with a $2 million investment portfolio in my personal name. So not in the business. So obviously that's post-tax income. And once again, I'd be happy to break that down in a separate video. So really, I can't urge you enough to get to the point where you've got 6 months of cash reserves. And then, if you're in your 20s, go pretty aggressive, invest 70% of everything you make after that point. For me, where I am now, everything I make, I only spend 10% of what I make. Obviously, you have to set aside, after I set aside money for taxes and this and that. After that point, and I do all those calculations, 10% of everything I make now goes towards kind of my lifestyle and how I live, between 10 and 15%. And then the other 80 to 85% goes to investments. Really your future self will thank you. And I guess that's the main kind of point I want to get across. And kind of what I realized in 2020 was like, Iman, just pace yourself. Like you have so much left of your life to live. And you can do obviously something that's incredible and a dream, buy your mom a Porsche 911, well over $100,000 car at the age of 20 years old. But it's like, that's still something nice to do when you're 25. But like, why not do this? Like, why not invest that money? And then when you're 25, buy your mom a Porsche and then also send her a wire transfer of the amount of money that was accrued through the investment that you made 5 years. There's just smarter ways to think about it. And I guess I really started to think that way in 2020. Obviously, as I said, I considering my circumstances and, the past 4.5 years in business, and my age, I've always been very, very sensible with money. I've saved money. I've kept really, really good cash reserves and, everything in between. But, now I'm really starting to think from a more investor perspective and starting to think really, really long term. So the goal is, for now, 25 million by the age of 25. So that's 25 million in assets, minus any debt, by the way. So that'll be my total equity in the assets that I own, between the different asset classes. So that's 25 million by the age of 25. And I want to do 100 million by the time I'm 30. And really the last lesson that I learned in 2020 is you are capable of so much more than you ever imagine or you could ever conceive. See, now that one sounds like one of those Instagram posts, like 7 lessons I learned in 2020. But, 2020 as a whole tested everyone. So just the fact that you got through the year should prove to you how strong you are. But after everything that happened in the year, after an incredible first 7 months, for me, I was just like so free and light, and the business was just, just absolutely ramping up, and just everything was so on point the first 7 months. And then going through the crazy 3 months of, chronic autoimmune condition and depression and anxiety and this and that. And then, kind of the last 3 months of the year, just getting to the point where I was like kind of coming back to my normal self and socializing and building a relationship and just kind of getting back to my full self with my team and my employees and this and that. Because kind of for the last 6 months of 2020, it's a shame. We made so much ground in the first 6 months. And then the last 6 months, because of me, because I had so much going on, obviously, understandably so, we just didn't really innovate much. It was like grew a lot and then just kind of, stagnated the last 6 months of the year. But, as I said, these things kind of come out of nowhere sometimes and you just have to deal with them. Anyway, so long story short, I wanted to end off 2020 doing something really tough to just prove to myself how strong I was again. So I'm sure many of you guys remember I decided to run a marathon with 14 days prep. And prior to that point, I had run 6.7 kilometers ever. That was the most I'd ever run. And yeah, I ended up running a marathon with 14 days prep. And I genuinely had maybe 50% belief that I would even finish it. And the other 50% of me was like, okay, cool, I'll probably do it in like 5 hours. I ended up doing the marathon in 3 hours and 50 minutes, which was a time that I'm just so proud of. And, I'm just so happy just because like in general, long distance has not been, or in cardio has never been my thing. I hate cardio. I never do it. And I've always kind of been the more explosive type, powerlifting, sprinting, that sort of stuff. So yeah, that really opened my eyes and it made me wake up. And I think for a lot of people who are in their first or second year in entrepreneurship or in business, you have that almost unrealistic spark of like almost certainty. Like in 2018, at the age of 18 years old, at the beginning of 2018, I said I'm going to make $1 million. And I made $1 million in 2018. And that was so crazy of me to think at the age of 18. And I did it. And then, I've been doing it plus some, plus multiples more ever since then. But I've gotten to a point now where I just think I'm a little, I'm not willing to absolutely push the ceiling. And you know, an example of this was my goal was always 6 million in assets by the age of 25. And after I did my marathon, I just reassessed things and I was just like, no, that's just, push yourself. Like, you're capable of so much more, Iman, than you could ever imagine. And I was like, you know what? 25 million in assets by the age of 25. That sounds a little better. So, you know, really 2020 and then doing that marathon at the end of 2020, it just proved to me that I'm capable of so much more than I know or than I imagine. And I think really that's an important life lesson. I think that's why it's so important to constantly think about ways that, and that's why I think it's so important to constantly just push yourself, like things that sound crazy. You know, scale up a mountain that you've always wanted to scale up. Do a half marathon. Do a marathon. Just do anything to prove to yourself that you are so much stronger. Because what that marathon did for me was, you know, unspeakable. Because as I said, you know, after I did that, I was like, man, you've just been thinking way too small. And immediately after that, I started looking at triathlons and, you know, other marathons and, you know, ultra marathons and stuff like that I could do, or even powerlifting competitions, or even just setting a goal for myself to deadlift a certain amount by the end of the year. Yeah, you really are capable of so much more than you could have ever imagined. So, ladies and gentlemen, those were my 7 lessons that I learned from the year. They're very kind of macro, and they're very, you know, they're not like very like, oh, I learned this one thing, blah, blah. And it almost kind of chronologically follows just lessons that I was dealt throughout the year, and just kind of with things that I experienced. So, I said, I don't know whether you guys thought that was total fluff and didn't care about 90% of the shit that I mentioned in this video, or whether you thought that was an interesting insight and a little bit more of an intimate insight into kind of some of the stuff that happened in 2020, how I dealt with it, how I viewed it, how my worldview changed, etc., etc. So yeah, let me know what you guys thought in the comments. Go ahead and smash the like button. Ladies and gentlemen, if you actually enjoyed this video. And as always, if you want to find the winner for the Gadzhi giveaway, it's going to be a pinned comment down below. And all you have to do to win an apparel from Gadzhi. I'm actually wearing the matte black blue light blockers, one of my favorite colorways. I'd say probably this and the crystal are my 2 favorite at the moment. But yeah, as I said, all you have to do to enter into the giveaway is just subscribe, turn on post notifications, comment within the first 2 hours of video going live, and then check back on the next video to see who the winner is. So lots of love, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey, look, if you enjoyed that video, I went ahead and picked out another special video that I know you're going to find immensely valuable. You can find it right there. I know you're going to love it, and I'll see you in the next one.